The email from the law firm arrived on a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and 5 weeks before what would have been her grandmother's 87th birthday. Jasmine Brooks was sitting in her cramped Brooklyn apartment, still in her scrubs from her shift at the hospital where she worked as a medical records clerk, eating leftover Chinese food straight from the container, when she opened it. Dear Ms. Brooks, regarding the estate of Mrs. Dorothy May Brooks, deceased October 28th. Jasmine stopped reading, the fork halfway to her mouth. Grandmother Dorothy was dead? The woman who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when Jasmine was 8. The woman who'd taught her to bake pies and identify constellations and believe that people were fundamentally good even when the world suggested otherwise. Gone. And Jasmine hadn't even known she was sick. The email continued with legal language about estates and inheritances and probate, but the essential information was clear. Grandmother Dorothy had left Jasmine her Christmas tree farm in Vermont, 140 acres of land, a farmhouse built in 1952, 2 massive red barns that her grandfather had constructed with his own hands, and approximately 15,000 Norway spruce and Fraser fir trees in various stages of growth, from seedlings barely poking through the soil to mature trees ready for harvest. Jasmine stared at the screen, trying to process the information that seemed impossible, despite being right there in black and white legal language. She'd visited the farm every summer as a child, had loved it desperately, the smell of pine that got into everything, the endless green that stretched as far as she could see, the particular quality of peace that seemed to seep from the ground itself, making even the most anxious thoughts settle into something manageable. But she hadn't been back in almost 10 years, not since starting college and then getting too busy with work and life and the general chaos of trying to survive in New York City on a salary that barely covered rent. And now it was hers. A farm she didn't know how to run in a state where she didn't live, representing a connection to her grandmother that she'd let atrophy through benign neglect, and the assumption that there would always be more time, more summers, more chances to visit. She called the law firm the next morning, her hands shaking as she dialed, and spoke to a patient attorney named Mr. Peterson who had the kind of gentle voice people used when delivering bad news. He explained that yes, the farm was hers, but it came with complications that Dorothy had been managing but that would now fall to Jasmine. There was a mortgage, small but present, about $80,000 remaining on a property worth potentially millions. Property taxes that were due in January, nearly $15,000. Operating costs that the farm's revenue from Christmas tree sales had barely covered in recent years, with Dorothy subsidizing the shortfall from her pension. And most significantly, most pressingly, there was an offer on the table from a development company that had been courting Dorothy for years. An offer? Jasmine asked, her voice catching on the word. From whom? Cascade Development Group, Mr. Peterson said, shuffling papers on his end of the line. They've been trying to purchase the property for the past 2 years. Your grandmother refused to sell repeatedly, quite adamantly actually, but the offer is still open. They're proposing $4.2 million for the land. Jasmine nearly dropped her phone, her fingers suddenly nerveless. $4.2 million, she repeated, certain she'd misheard. Yes, Mr. Peterson confirmed. Apparently the location is ideal for a luxury resort development. Ski access within 20 minutes. Mountain views that are apparently quite spectacular. Proximity to several upscale Vermont towns that attract wealthy tourists. They want to build condos and a boutique hotel, maybe a spa, the whole luxury destination package. My grandmother said no, Jasmine said slowly, her mind trying to catch up with the information. She did, Mr. Peterson confirmed. Multiple times. She was quite adamant that the farm stay a farm, that it was a family legacy and not a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. But Ms. Brooks, I have to be honest with you in a way. I couldn't be with Dorothy because she was my client and her wishes were paramount. The property is losing money. The Christmas season revenue isn't enough to cover year-round costs. Without significant capital investment and active management, without someone living there and running it as a full-time business, the farm won't survive another 2 years. Selling might be the practical choice, perhaps even the only realistic choice. Can I think about it? Jasmine asked, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make. Of course, Mr. Peterson said kindly. But Cascade Development is only holding the offer open until December 31st. After that, they've indicated they're pursuing other properties in the region. You have about 6 weeks to decide. Jasmine hung up and sat in her apartment, staring at the walls that were painted that generic beige that every rental seemed to favor, feeling the weight of a decision that felt impossible from every angle. Sell the farm and have enough money to pay off her student loans that had been hanging over her head for 6 years? Maybe even buy a small place instead of renting? Have financial security for the first time in her adult life? Breathe without the constant anxiety about money? Or keep the farm, and what exactly? Quit her job and move to Vermont to grow Christmas trees when she had no farming experience, no capital to invest, no idea what she was doing beyond childhood memories of running through the rows of trees and helping her grandmother wrap purchases in netting. She needed advice. She needed perspective. She needed her pen pal. 3 years ago, Jasmine had joined an app called Lang Connect, designed for people learning foreign languages to practice with native speakers through text exchanges. She'd been trying to learn Korean, fascinated by the language and culture after falling down a K-drama rabbit hole during a particularly stressful period at work, watching subtitled shows to unwind after long hospital shifts spent filing paperwork and correcting medical codes. The app matched her with a Korean user who was practicing English, working on eliminating his accent through text before trying verbal communication. They were only identified by usernames. Hers was Bookworm Jazz because she loved reading, and her middle name was Jasmine, and his was SeoulSearcher, which she'd always thought was clever wordplay. They'd agreed to exchange messages, half in English and half in Korean, helping each other learn through conversation rather than formal lessons. What started as language practice had evolved into something much deeper over time, the way relationships sometimes do. When you're not looking directly at them, they messaged almost daily, sometimes multiple times a day, long conversations about everything and nothing, their dreams, their fears, their families, their frustrations with work and life, and the general difficulty of being human in the modern world. He told her about the pressure of family expectations in Korea, about feeling trapped by obligation to become who his parents wanted rather than who he actually was. She told him about losing her parents young, about being raised by her grandmother who did her best but was already elderly and exhausted, about feeling like she was always struggling to keep her head above water financially while watching other people seem to coast through life with family money and connections. They'd never exchanged real names, never video called, never even sent photos, though she'd suggested it once, and he'd demurred, saying he preferred their friendship be about words and ideas rather than appearance. She knew from his descriptions that he was 32, tall for a Korean man at about 6 feet, had gotten a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident involving a broken window. She knew he liked hiking and old movies, particularly film noir, and terrible puns that made her laugh even when they were objectively stupid. She knew his voice through his words, his heart through his honesty, his soul through 3 years of accumulated conversations. And somewhere over those 3 years of messages, gradually and then suddenly, Jasmine had fallen in love with him. It was absurd. Falling in love with someone you'd never met, whose face you'd never seen, whose real name you didn't know, whose actual life circumstances might be completely different from what he'd described, though she didn't think so, thought she knew him well enough to recognize truth. But she had fallen because SeoulSearcher understood her in ways no one else did, not her co-workers or the few friends she'd maintained through the chaos of adult life. Because their conversations felt more real than most of her in-person relationships that were superficial and transactional. Because when something happened, good or bad, significant or trivial, he was the first person she wanted to tell, the first person whose reaction mattered. She opened the app and typed, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. My grandmother died. I inherited her Christmas tree farm in Vermont. A development company wants to buy it for millions. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should keep something I can't manage or sell something that meant everything to her. Help me think through this. His response came within minutes, the speed suggesting he'd been online, maybe waiting to see if she'd message. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. I know how much she meant to you, how much she shaped who you are. The farm question is hard. What does your heart say when you think about it? My heart says keep it. Honor her memory. Try to maintain what she built. But my brain says I can't afford that kind of sentimentality, that keeping it is impractical and will lead to bankruptcy and losing it anyway in 2 years when I can't make it work. Money isn't the only thing that matters. What would keeping it give you beyond financial stress? SeoulSearcher asked, and she could hear his voice in her head, even though she'd never actually heard it. Could imagine the thoughtful way he'd pause between sentences when they messaged. A connection to her, a purpose maybe, a life that's about something more than just surviving. More than just showing up to a job I don't love to pay bills that never stop coming, but also debt and responsibility and a complete life change I'm not sure I'm ready for. What if I fail? What if I try and lose it anyway and end up with nothing? What would selling it give you? SeoulSearcher asked, always turning her thoughts back to herself, making her examine her own assumptions. Financial security for the first time in my adult life. No more student loan payments, maybe even buying a small place. Actually having savings. Not living paycheck to paycheck for the first time since I graduated college. But also guilt that I let developers destroy something she loved. Guilt that I chose money over legacy. Guilt that I'm not strong enough or brave enough to even try. They messaged back and forth for over an hour. Him asking questions that helped her think through the decision without telling her what to do. Her gradually realizing through the process of explaining it to him that she couldn't sell the farm. Not yet. Not without at least seeing it, spending time there, understanding what she'd be giving up, understanding what her grandmother had loved enough to refuse millions for. I'm going to Vermont, she finally typed, the decision solidifying as she wrote it. I'm going to spend the Christmas season at the farm. See what it's really like to run it. See if I can make it work or if selling is the only realistic option. Then I'll decide. That's brave, SeoulSearcher wrote, and she could feel his approval through the screen. I'm proud of you for not taking the easy way out, for at least trying before giving up. Brave or stupid? Jasmine asked. a question she'd asked him dozens of times over 3 years about various decisions. "Can be both," he wrote, the response he always gave their established pattern. "Brave and stupid often overlap. The best decisions usually involve elements of both." 2 weeks later, after giving notice at her job that she was taking unpaid leave through January, after subletting her apartment to a friend's cousin, after packing everything she might need for a Vermont winter into a rented SUV, Jasmine was driving up a winding mountain road, following GPS directions to the farm she hadn't seen in a decade. It was early December, the landscape already dusted with snow that made everything look clean and soft. Trees dark against white hills, everything looking like a Christmas card or a Thomas Kincaid painting. She turned onto a private road marked with a weathered wooden sign that read, "Brooks Family Tree Farm. Choose and cut. November 20th to December 23rd. Her grandmother's handwriting on the sign, Jasmine recognized it from childhood birthday cards and letters. The road wound through evergreens that pressed close on both sides, creating a tunnel effect. And then the farmhouse appeared at the end of the drive, and Jasmine felt her breath catch in her throat. 2 stories, white clapboard with green shutters that needed repainting, a wraparound porch where she'd spent summer evenings learning to identify constellations, the Big Dipper and Orion and Cassiopeia. Smoke was coming from the chimney, which meant someone was there, maintaining it, probably Earl, who the lawyer had mentioned was her grandmother's farm manager, and was still working through the Christmas season. The farm was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache with memory and loss. Rows and rows of Christmas trees in neat lines stretching up the hillside. The barns painted red and white with that classic New England aesthetic. Mountains visible in the distance creating a backdrop that belonged in a movie. It looked exactly like she remembered, but also smaller somehow, the way childhood places always do when you return as an adult. Earl appeared from one of the barns before she'd even turned off the engine. A man in his 60s with a weathered face that spoke of decades working outside, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, wearing overalls and a thick flannel jacket. "You must be Jasmine," he said as she got out of the car, his voice gravelly but warm. "I'm real sorry about Dorothy. She was a good woman, one of the best I ever knew. Talked about you all the time, showed everyone pictures, was so proud of you getting your degree and making a life in the city. Thank you," Jasmine said, feeling tears threaten and pushing them back. "Thanks for keeping things running. I know this must be strange, me showing up after all this time." "Well, it's what she paid me for," Earl said practically. "Though I should tell you straight off, this season isn't going well. We're way down on sales compared to last year. People are going to the bigger operations, the ones with hay rides and hot chocolate stands and candy cane forests and all the Instagram-worthy extras. We're just trees. Good trees, mind you, healthy stock, well-maintained. But it's not enough anymore. People want an experience, not just a product." "Show me around?" Jasmine asked, needing to see everything to understand the full scope of what she'd inherited. Earl gave her a comprehensive tour, walking her through the entire operation with the patient thoroughness of someone who knew his subject intimately. The equipment that was aging and needed replacement within the next 2 years. The tractor that was held together more by hope than mechanics. The chainsaw collection that was from the 1980s. The irrigation system that was failing, pipes bursting regularly. The pump making ominous sounds that suggested imminent failure. The younger trees that wouldn't be ready to harvest for another 3 to 5 years depending on species, representing investment without immediate return, money her grandmother had put into the future without knowing she wouldn't see it. The farmhouse that was charming but needed significant repairs. The roof that was original to 1952 and somehow still functional, but wouldn't survive another hard winter. The electrical system that was barely up to code. The plumbing that worked until it didn't. The financial reality was overwhelming even with Earl's gentle delivery. Even if she wanted to keep the farm, even if she moved here permanently and dedicated herself to it completely, she'd need capital. She didn't have to make it viable. The equipment alone would cost upwards of $50,000 to replace. The irrigation system another $30,000. The roof $40,000 minimum. And that didn't account for the operating costs, the seasonal labor, the mortgage payments, and property taxes. By the time Earl left for the day, waving goodbye and promising to return tomorrow to help with the weekend customers, Jasmine was sitting on the farmhouse porch feeling defeated and small. Maybe selling was the only realistic option. Maybe her grandmother had been able to maintain the farm through stubbornness and pension money. But Jasmine didn't have either advantage. Maybe loving something wasn't enough to save it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from SeoulSearcher, appearing at exactly the moment she needed it most, the way he often did, their timing synchronized after 3 years. "How's the farm? Is it everything you remembered?" She typed back, her fingers cold in the December air. "Beautiful and broken. I don't think I can save it even if I want to. The money it needs is more than I can possibly raise. I'm starting to think selling is inevitable, and I'm just delaying the inevitable by being here." "Maybe saving it isn't your job," he wrote back quickly. "Maybe just loving it is enough. Maybe bearing witness to what it was, honoring your grandmother by understanding what she built, that's valuable even if the outcome is still selling." "Love doesn't pay mortgages," Jasmine wrote bitterly. "No," he agreed, "but it makes the struggle worthwhile. And you won't know if you can save it unless you try. Maybe the answer is somewhere you haven't looked yet." She went inside and explored the farmhouse with new eyes, adult eyes that saw both the charm and the decay. It was exactly as she remembered, but also different. Touched by time and her grandmother's aging. Her grandmother's furniture, worn comfortable chairs, and a couch with doilies and that particular smell of old houses, must and wood smoke and time. Her books lining shelves in the living room, mysteries and romances and gardening guides. Her photographs on the walls, creating a family history in images. Jasmine as a child, grinning gap-toothed in front of a Christmas tree that came up to her waist. Her parents' wedding photo, both of them so young and happy, and completely unaware they had less than 10 years before a drunk driver would end everything. Grandmother Dorothy, as a young woman with her husband James, who died of a heart attack before Jasmine was born, both of them standing in front of the farmhouse when it was new, when everything was ahead of them. This was legacy, this was family, this was everything money couldn't buy and everything money tried to take. That night, Jasmine built a fire in the fireplace that had been heating the house since 1952, made tea in her grandmother's ancient kettle that whistled the same way it had in childhood, and curled up with her laptop to research Christmas tree farming. It was more complex than she'd realized, more than just planting trees and cutting them down 7 years later. Growing trees from seedlings took 7 to 10 years, depending on species and growing conditions. You had to manage pests and disease, everything from aphids to needlecast fungi. Shape the trees through careful pruning that required skill and timing, creating that perfect conical Christmas tree shape that didn't happen naturally. Handle the logistics of seasonal sales, the marketing and customer service, and physical labor of helping families cut and transport trees. It was farming and retail and customer service, all combined into one exhausting package. She was deep into an article about Fraser fir cultivation, learning about their preference for higher elevations and susceptibility to root rot, when there was a knock on the door. Sharp and professional, not the casual rap of a neighbor. She opened it to find a Korean man in his early 30s, tall, probably around 6 feet, wearing an expensive wool coat that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, holding a leather briefcase that matched his shoes. He was handsome in that sharp-featured way, dark hair styled perfectly, skin clear, everything about him screaming money and polish and corporate success. And there was something about his eyes that felt familiar, though she knew she'd never seen him before. Would have remembered. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his English perfect with just a trace of an accent that suggested Korean was his first language, but he'd been speaking English for years. "I'm Kang Seo-jun, representing Cascade Development Group. I heard you'd arrived and wanted to introduce myself, discuss our offer for the property." Jasmine felt her defenses go up immediately, her shoulders tensing, her expression hardening. "I'm not interested in selling." "I understand," Seo-jun said, and his tone wasn't pushy, wasn't aggressive, was actually almost careful. "But perhaps we could talk. I promise I'm not here to pressure you or employ hard sell tactics. I just want to explain what we're proposing, answer any questions you might have, make sure you have all the information before you make such an important decision." "It's late," Jasmine said, even though it was only 8 p.m. "Perhaps tomorrow. There's a coffee shop in town, Maple and Bean. I could meet you there at 10 a.m. if you're willing to hear me out. No obligation, just conversation." Something in his tone wasn't pushy, was actually almost uncertain. Like he was nervous about this conversation in a way that didn't fit with corporate developer trying to acquire property. Jasmine found herself saying against her better judgment, "Fine, 10 a.m. But I'm not making any promises about selling." "I wouldn't expect you to," Seo-jun said. "Thank you for being willing to listen, that's all I'm asking." He left, and Jasmine watched him drive away in a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years of working at the hospital. Developers. Here to turn her grandmother's legacy into luxury condos for rich people who wanted mountain views and ski access. Here to destroy something authentic and replace it with something manufactured. She messaged SeoulSearcher about it, needing to vent her frustration. "The development company sent someone to pressure me to sell. Korean guy, probably early 30s, driving a car that costs more than my student loans. Meeting him tomorrow to hear the pitch, I'm definitely going to refuse. But I guess I should at least understand what they're offering before I tell them to leave me alone." "Be careful," SeoulSearcher wrote back. Developers can be very persuasive. They're trained in exactly what to say to make selling seem like the smart choice. "I'm not selling my grandmother's farm so rich people can have vacation homes," Jasmine wrote firmly. "This place meant something to her. It means something to me. That matters more than money." "Good," he responded. "Don't let anyone talk you into something that doesn't feel right. Trust your instincts. You know what matters." The next morning, Jasmine drove into town, a picturesque Vermont village that looked like it was designed specifically to appear on postcards and calendars, the kind of place that probably did significant Christmas tourism business. Maple and Bean was a cozy coffee shop with local art on the walls and the smell of fresh pastries and artisanal coffee that cost too much but tasted amazing. Seo-jun was already there, sitting at a corner table away from other customers, with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. "I took the liberty of ordering," he said as she approached, standing politely until she sat. The barista said their house blend was excellent and their specialty is a maple cinnamon latte. But if you prefer something else, I'm happy to order whatever you'd like." "This is fine," Jasmine said, sitting down and taking the coffee cup defensively, wrapping her hands around it, like it was armor against whatever pitch he was about to make. Seo-jun opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency and pulled out a folder filled with documents, charts, projections, all the apparatus of corporate land acquisition. "I want to start by saying I understand this property has sentimental value. Your grandmother clearly loved this land and put significant work into maintaining it for decades. I respect that, and I'm not here to diminish it or suggest that sentiment doesn't matter." "But you want to destroy it and build condos," Jasmine said flatly. "We want to develop it into something sustainable and economically viable," Seo-jun corrected, his tone careful. "The reality is, Christmas tree farms are struggling across New England. Climate change is making growing seasons unpredictable. Competition from artificial trees is increasing every year. The high cost of land maintenance in this region. Most small operations like yours are barely breaking even. We're offering $4.2 million, which would give you financial security for life while allowing us to create something that serves the community through tourism and jobs." "Serves wealthy tourists," Jasmine said, "while destroying a working farm that's been here for 40 years. That's part of this community's character." "Your grandmother was losing money," Seo-jun said gently, pulling out financial documents. "I've reviewed the tax records and financial statements. She was subsidizing the farm with her pension for the last 5 years. Without that income, the property will fail within 2 years maximum. Selling now means you get fair value for the land. Waiting means you get nothing when the bank forecloses, and you've also wasted 2 years trying to save something that can't be saved." "How do you know about her pension?" Jasmine demanded, feeling violated. "That's private information. You investigated my grandmother's finances?" Seo-jun looked uncomfortable, the first crack in his professional demeanor. "We did our research. I apologize if that feels invasive, but it's standard due diligence for property acquisition of this scale. We need to understand the full financial picture before making offers." "Get out," Jasmine said, her voice low and dangerous. "What?" Seo-jun looked genuinely surprised. "Get out. This meeting is over. You investigated my grandmother's finances without permission. You're trying to use her death to pressure me. To sell before I've even had time to grieve. You're sitting here with your expensive coffee and your fancy suit talking about sustainability while planning to destroy something she loved. I'm not interested in your offer. I'm not interested in your research. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. Leave. Now." Seo-jun looked stricken, his carefully composed expression crumbling into something that looked almost like pain. "Ms. Brooks, please. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just trying to present the facts to make sure you have complete information. The facts, according to your company, that profits from those facts being interpreted a certain way," Jasmine said, standing up. "I said leave." He gathered his things slowly like he wanted to say something else but couldn't find the words. He looked back once as he walked away, an expression she couldn't read crossing his face, something between regret and something else, before he pushed through the door and disappeared. When he was gone, Jasmine sat alone with her coffee that had gone cold, feeling tears threatening. He was probably right about everything. That was the terrible truth. The farm was failing. She couldn't save it with sentiment and good intentions. Selling was the practical choice, maybe the only realistic choice. But she couldn't do it. Not yet. Not without trying. She spent the next week learning to actually run the farm, going beyond Earl's tour to hands-on work. Earl taught her how to identify good trees versus ones that needed more growing time, the subtle differences in needle color and branch density that indicated health. How to help customers cut their trees safely, the proper angle for the chainsaw, the technique for getting the tree to fall where you wanted. How to manage the 3 seasonal staff they'd hired for December, college kids home for break dark who needed supervision and instruction. How to operate the ancient cash register and process credit cards and make change when customers paid in cash. How to wrap trees in netting so they'd fit in cars, the specific technique that made it easier. They had 12 customers that first week. Families looking for the perfect tree, children running through the rows of evergreens, with that particular joy that only kids can muster for something as simple as picking a tree. Parents taking photos, couples holding hands, elderly people who'd been coming to Brooks Family Tree Farm for decades and remembered Jasmine as a child. Every transaction reminded her why this place mattered, why it was more than just commerce and land value. Every evening she'd return to the farmhouse, exhausted in a way that felt good rather than depleting. Physical labor that left her muscles sore but her mind clear. And she'd message SeoulSearcher about her day, finding comfort in sharing the details with someone who understood why this mattered. There was this little girl today, Jasmine wrote one night, curled up by the fire with her laptop, maybe 5 years old. She found a scraggly tree that was totally lopsided, probably damaged by deer or disease, would never sell to anyone rational. Her parents tried to steer her toward better trees, full beautiful ones. But she wouldn't budge. Said the scraggly one needed a home, that it would be sad if no one wanted it. They bought it, and she was so happy, named it Fred. That's what this place is. It's about families making memories, about little girls saving scraggly trees named Fred. How do I let that become luxury condos? You don't, SeoulSearcher wrote back. You find a way to keep it. But how? Jasmine asked, the question that kept her up at night. I don't have the capital to fix everything that's broken. I don't have farming experience. I don't even know if I can make this work even if I try. I don't know the how, SeoulSearcher admitted, but I believe if anyone can figure it out, you can. You're resourceful and determined, and you care about things beyond just your own comfort. That matters more than capital or experience. On the 10th day, Seo-jun came back to the farm. Jasmine was in one of the fields, helping a young couple tie their tree to the roof of their Subaru with twine, making sure it was secure enough to survive the drive home, when she saw him approaching across the snow. He wasn't wearing the expensive wool coat today, was in jeans and a more casual jacket, looking somehow younger and less intimidating, dressed like a normal person rather than a corporate representative. She finished with the customers, took their payment of $45 for a 6-foot Fraser fir, wished them a Merry Christmas, and then turned to face him with her arms crossed defensively. I thought I made it clear I wasn't interested in your offer, she said coldly. You did, Seo-jun said quickly. I'm not here about the offer. I'm here to apologize. The way I presented information last time was insensitive and corporate and treated this like a business transaction when it's clearly much more personal for you. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for investigating your grandmother's finances without permission. I'm sorry for trying to use data to override your emotional connection to this place. It was wrong. Jasmine studied him. This man who'd made her so angry 4 days ago, but who now looked genuinely remorseful, tired actually, like he hadn't been sleeping well. The thought occurred to her that maybe this acquisition bothered him too. Apology noted, she said carefully. Was there anything else? Can I ask you something? Seo-jun said. not as a representative of Cascade Development, just as someone who's curious. Why are you fighting so hard to keep this? Not judgment, genuine curiosity. You have a life in New York, a job, friends, your whole existence built there. Why upend all of that for a struggling farm in Vermont that you haven't visited in a decade? Because my grandmother loved it, Jasmine said. Because I loved it as a child, and those memories matter. Because some things matter more than profit margins or practical considerations. Because not everything should be evaluated purely on economic viability. Because the world needs places like this, places that have history and meaning, places that aren't just optimized for maximum financial return. I understand that, Seo-jun said quietly, and something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. More than you might think. Do you? Jasmine challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you're just another developer seeing dollar signs and land value, reducing something meaningful to a spreadsheet. What if I told you I actually agree with you? Seo-jun said. That I think places like this should be preserved, that not everything should be developed, that sometimes the intangible value matters more than the market value? Then I'd ask why you're working for Cascade Development, Jasmine said. If you believe that, why are you here trying to convince me to sell? Because I'm trying to change things from inside, Seo-jun said, and she heard frustration in his voice. I have ideas about sustainable development that respects local character, but about projects that benefit communities instead of just investors. But I'm junior in the company. This is only my second acquisition assignment, and this was the project I was given. Acquire this property or prove conclusively why we shouldn't. I've actually been hoping you wouldn't sell, so I could go back and argue for passing on the project, for looking elsewhere. Jasmine felt something shift, her certainty wavering. You want me to refuse? I want you to make the choice that's right for you, Seo-jun said carefully. But personally, selfishly, I'd rather see this place stay a tree farm. I think the world needs more places like this, not fewer. I think your grandmother was right to refuse our offers. I think there's value here that can't be measured in dollars. They stood in the snow between rows of evergreens, both of them breathing clouds into the cold air. And Jasmine felt her certainty about who he was wavering. He wasn't what she'd expected. Wasn't just a corporate villain trying to steal her land. He was complicated. Would you like to see the rest of the farm? She found herself asking, the invitation surprising her as much as it probably surprised him. Actually see what you're trying to acquire? Not just the financial documents and property surveys, but the actual place? I'd love to, Seo-jun said, and his expression was genuinely grateful. She showed him everything over the next 2 hours, walking him through the entire operation with the same thoroughness Earl had shown her. The irrigation system that was failing, pointing out where pipes had burst and been temporarily patched with duct tape and prayer. The barn that needed a new roof, showing him the places where daylight showed through gaps in the boards. The equipment shed full of machinery that should have been replaced a decade ago. The younger trees that represented years of work before they'd generate any revenue, explaining the 7 to 10 year growing cycle, and how her grandmother had been planting for a future she wouldn't see. She explained the challenges honestly, not trying to hide the problems or pretend the farm was more viable than it was. The costs, the labor requirements, the overwhelming reality of trying to make this sustainable. And Seo-jun listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions that suggested he was actually interested rather than just gathering information for his report. He asked about species selection and growing cycles, about customer demographics and seasonal versus year-round revenue, about what it had been like visiting as a child, what memories she had of the place. Questions that felt personal rather than professional. As the sun began to set, painting the snow pink and gold, they ended up at the farmhouse porch. Jasmine was exhausted from walking and talking, from showing this stranger everything that mattered. "Would you like to come in?" she found herself asking. "I was about to make dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever I can find in the pantry." "You're welcome to stay if you want, as thanks for listening, I guess." "I'd like that," Seo-jun said, "if you're sure it's not an imposition." They cooked together, an easy partnership that developed naturally without discussion or planning. Seo-jun chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency, while Jasmine boiled pasta and heated sauce. And they talked about everything except the farm and the acquisition. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about the pressure of family expectations to join the family business, which was manufacturing, to follow a prescribed path. About how he'd chosen development and real estate partly because it was adjacent to the family business, but different enough to feel like his own choice. She told him about losing her parents in the car accident, about being raised by her grandmother who did her best but was already in her 60s, about learning early that life was fragile and nothing was guaranteed. And throughout the conversation, Jasmine kept having this strange feeling that she knew him, that their conversation felt familiar in a way she couldn't place. The rhythm of it, the way he phrased things, even some of his specific word choices. Like she'd had these conversations before with someone else. "Do we know each other?" she finally asked, interrupting him mid-sentence about his college years. "From somewhere before this? Have we met?" Seo-jun's expression flickered with something that looked almost like panic before he controlled it. "I don't think so. Why do you ask?" "You just feel familiar," Jasmine said, studying his face. "The way you talk, the things you say, your thought patterns." "I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I'm just tired and seeing patterns that aren't there." "Maybe we're just compatible," Seo-jun said carefully, not quite meeting her eyes. "Some people just click, just have natural rapport, even when they've just met, don't you think?" After dinner, after they'd cleaned up together and he'd helped her wash dishes in her grandmother's ancient sink, Seo-jun left. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, always with some excuse that grew increasingly transparent. He needed to take more photos for his report. He wanted to understand the business model better. He was curious about the tree species. He wanted to see the customer experience, but really, they both knew he just wanted to be there, wanted to be around her. They fell into a routine over the following week and a half. He'd arrive mid-morning after she'd already been working for a couple hours. He'd help with whatever needed doing without being asked, fixing the sagging porch railing that had been bothering her, helping Earl repair a section of the irrigation system, researching grants for small farms, and finding 3 that Jasmine qualified for. He stayed for meals. They'd cook together and talk, and it started to feel domestic in a way that should have been alarming, but somehow wasn't. "Why are you doing this?" Jasmine asked one evening as they sat by the fire after another long day. "You're supposed to be convincing me to sell, not helping me keep the place running." "I know," Seo-jun said, staring into the flames. "I'm terrible at my job, apparently. My supervisor is going to be very disappointed in my progress." "Seo-jun," Jasmine said seriously, setting down her wine glass. "What's really happening here? Why are you spending all your time helping me instead of doing what your company sent you to do?" He looked at her across the firelight, and his expression was full of things unsaid, complicated emotions she couldn't quite read. "I like being here. I like being with you." I like the person I am when I'm on this farm more than the person I am anywhere else. Is that enough of an answer? It wasn't. But Jasmine let it be because she was feeling the same things. This pull toward him that didn't make rational sense but felt inevitable anyway, like gravity or weather patterns or any other natural force you couldn't argue with. 2 weeks before Christmas, right in the middle of their busiest sales period, Cascade Development sent Seo-jun's supervisor to check on the acquisition progress. A woman named Mrs. Park, who was all business and no warmth, wearing a power suit that probably cost what Jasmine used to make in a month, who walked through the farm like she was already mentally bulldozing it to make room for luxury condos. She met with Jasmine in the farmhouse, laying out documents with practiced efficiency, and made an enhanced offer. $5 million. Take it or leave it. Offer expires December 20th, less than 2 weeks away. $5 million, Jasmine repeated, the number almost meaningless because it was so large. That's life-changing money, Ms. Brooks, Mrs. Park said, her tone suggesting she thought Jasmine was an idiot for not having accepted already. You could pay off any debts, buy property anywhere, never work another day in your life if you invested wisely. And frankly, our analysis shows this property will be bankrupt within 18 months maximum. You can take our offer and be set for life, or you can struggle for another year and then lose everything to the bank anyway. It's not a difficult choice if you're thinking rationally. Then why does it feel impossible? Jasmine asked. Mrs. Park's expression softened slightly, the first hint of humanity she'd shown. Because you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. I understand. I've been in development for 20 years, and I've seen this pattern. People get attached to places, to memories, to what things represent. But hearts don't pay bills. Hearts don't fix failing irrigation systems or replace roofs. Hearts are lovely, but they're not practical. After Mrs. Park left, after her Mercedes had disappeared down the driveway, trailing exhaust in the cold air, Jasmine found Seo-jun in the barn, looking tense and unhappy. Your supervisor just upped the offer to $5 million, Jasmine said. She was very insistent that I'm an idiot if I don't accept. She did what? Seo-jun said, looking genuinely surprised and upset. Why didn't she tell me she was increasing the offer? Maybe because you've been too busy helping me keep the place instead of closing the deal, Jasmine said. Are you in trouble with your company because of me? Probably, Seo-jun admitted. Mrs. Park has been asking why this acquisition is taking so long, why I haven't closed yet. I think she suspects I'm not pushing hard enough, that I've gotten too close to the situation. Because you have, Jasmine said. You've been here almost every day for 2 weeks. You've been helping me instead of pressuring me. Why, Seo-jun? Why are you sabotaging your own assignment? He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the barn, she could see conflict written clearly across his face. Because I can't be the reason you lose this place. Because watching you here, seeing how much you love it, how hard you're working to save it, I can't be part of destroying that. I can't be the person who convinces you to give up. But it's your job, Jasmine said. It's literally what you were sent here to do. I don't care about the job, Seo-jun said intensely, stepping closer. I care about you. The words hung in the cold air of the barn, visible almost, the weight of them changing something fundamental. Seo-jun, Jasmine started, not sure what to say, how to respond to this confession she'd been half expecting and half dreading. I know it's fast, he said quickly. I know we barely know each other, that this is probably inappropriate given the circumstances, but Jasmine, being with you feels like coming home, like finding something I didn't know I was looking for. And I can't pretend I don't feel that just because it's inconvenient or complicates my job. Jasmine felt her heart racing, felt herself drawn toward him and pulling back at the same time. I need to think, she said, about the offer, about all of it. This is a lot. Take all the time you need, Seo-jun said. I'll be here, whatever you decide. That night, alone in the farmhouse, after Seo-jun had left, looking like he wanted to say more but didn't, Jasmine opened the Lang Connect app to message SeoulSearcher. She needed his perspective, his clarity, his way of asking the right questions that helped her think. But when she opened the app, there was already a message from him waiting, time-stamped from 2 hours ago. Her hands started shaking before she even read it. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid. I'm in Vermont. I've been there for 3 weeks. I'm the developer trying to buy your farm. I'm Kang Seo-jun. I'm SeoulSearcher, and I've known it was you from the moment we met. Jasmine stared at the screen, her heart stopping, the world tilting. No, that wasn't possible. SeoulSearcher was her friend, her confidant, the person she'd shared everything with for 3 years. He couldn't be Seo-jun. Could he? But even as she denied it, pieces started clicking into place with horrible clarity. She scrolled back through years of messages with new eyes, looking for clues she'd missed. The things he'd said about family pressure, about feeling trapped by obligation to follow a prescribed path his parents wanted. The way he'd described being tall for a Korean man, about 6 feet. The scar on his left hand from a childhood accident. She'd seen that scar on Seo-jun's hand when he'd been fixing the porch railing. A thin white line across his palm. The way their conversations had felt familiar from the beginning. The rhythm of how they talked. The way he phrased things, his thought patterns. She'd noticed it the first time they had dinner together, but dismissed it as coincidence or wishful thinking. Oh God. Seo-jun was SeoulSearcher. The man she'd been falling for in person was the man she'd already fallen for online. And he'd known. From the very first meeting in the coffee shop, he'd known who she was, and he'd never said anything. Never told her. Let her think they were strangers when he knew everything about her. Had 3 years of her messages, her secrets, her vulnerabilities. She typed with shaking hands, tears already streaming down her face. You knew. From the beginning, from that first meeting at the coffee shop, you knew it was me and you never said anything. 3 years of messages where we told each other everything and you never mentioned you were sent to ruin me. You let me fall for you while hiding who you really were. How could you do that? His response came immediately, like he'd been waiting by his phone. I didn't know how to tell you. Every day I wanted to. But I was afraid of losing you, both versions of you. The friend I'd been talking to for years and the woman I was falling in love with in person. I know that's not good enough. I know I should have told you immediately. I was a coward and I'm so sorry, Jasmine. I'm so fucking sorry. Jasmine threw her phone across the room, heard it hit the wall with a crack that probably meant a broken screen, but she didn't care. She was crying, she realized. Great shaking sobs of betrayal and confusion and rage. Everything had been a lie. Everything. Their friendship online had been built on anonymity that he'd violated. Their connection in person had been based on him hiding who he really was. He'd manipulated her, getting close to her through the app for 3 years, while knowing the whole time that he might one day be sent to acquire her property. Or maybe that's why he'd befriended her in the first place. Maybe his company had matched them deliberately. She grabbed her coat and went out into the night, not caring that it was snowing hard, not caring that she was freezing in just jeans and a sweatshirt. She walked through the rows of Christmas trees, the snow falling thick and fast, walking until she reached the highest point of the property where her grandfather had built a small gazebo decades ago. From here she could see the lights of the farmhouse far below, the barns, the rows and rows of trees covered in fresh snow. Her grandmother's legacy. The thing Seo-jun had been sent to convince her to destroy. Seo-jun appeared behind her. She heard his footsteps crunching in the snow, heard him breathing hard like he'd been running before she saw him. He must have been watching from somewhere, must have seen her leave the house. "Don't," she said without turning around, her voice raw from crying. "Please, Jasmine, let me explain." "Explain what?" She whirled to face him, not caring that tears were still streaming down her face. "Explain how you lied to me for 3 years, how you matched with me on that app and decided to become my friend, while probably already knowing your company was interested in my grandmother's property. How you came to my farm pretending to be a stranger, while knowing everything about me. Every secret I'd shared, every vulnerability, every stupid thing I'd told SeoulSearcher because I thought I could trust him. I didn't recognize you from your username," Seo-jun said desperately, snow already covering his hair. "The app matching was random. I didn't know anything about you when we first matched. I swear. I was just a guy trying to practice English, and you were trying to learn Korean. That part was real. Completely real." "Then when?" Jasmine demanded. "When did you realize? When did you decide to keep lying?" "The first time we spoke in person," Seo-jun admitted. "At the coffee shop. When you talked about your grandmother and the farm, I knew. The way you phrased things, your voice, even though I'd only ever read your words, something just clicked. Bookworm Jazz. The woman I'd been talking to for 3 years. The woman I'd started to fall in love with without ever seeing her face. And you were the target of my acquisition assignment." "And you said nothing," Jasmine said, her voice breaking. "You sat there and listened to me talk about how a development company was trying to buy my farm, and you knew that was you, that was your company, and you didn't say a word." "I didn't know how," Seo-jun said. And she could hear pain in his voice too, which just made her angrier. I should have explained everything that first day, but I was afraid you'd refuse to talk to me, refuse to even consider listening if you knew who I was. And I thought if I could just get you to see me as a person first, not as SeoulSearcher and not as the corporate representative, just as Seo-jun who liked you, then maybe when I did tell you, you'd understand. So you got close to me," Jasmine said. "You spent weeks helping me fix things, having dinners with me, making me trust you as Seo-jun, while knowing the whole time that you were also SeoulSearcher, using what I'd told you online to manipulate me in person." "No," Seo-jun said forcefully. "I never used anything against you. I never brought up things you'd only told SeoulSearcher to manipulate you as Seo-jun. If anything, knowing you made me want to help you more, made me want to protect you and this place. Every grant I found, every repair I made, every time I argued with my company about giving you more time, that was me trying to protect you." "While still taking their paycheck," Jasmine shot back. "While still having your job officially be acquiring my property, while still lying every single day about who you really were." "I was going to quit," Seo-jun said. "I have my resignation written after you made your decision about selling, after the acquisition either succeeded or failed. I was going to quit and tell you everything. Tell you I was SeoulSearcher, that I'd been in love with you for years, that I'd sabotaged the acquisition on purpose because I cared more about you than my career. I just wanted to wait until the pressure was off, until you didn't have to worry about me using my position to influence you." "How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" Jasmine asked, her voice raw. "When literally everything about us has been based on lies? When you've had 3 years of my messages to study to figure out exactly what to say to make me trust you?" "Not lies," Seo-jun said. I lied by omission about my identity, but everything else was true. Everything I told you as SeoulSearcher was real. My feelings, my past, my struggles with family, all of it. The only lie was not telling you I was both people. And I know that's a massive lie. I know it violates everything, but Jasmine, please. The feelings weren't fake. What I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. Get off my property, Jasmine said, her voice cold now, anger freezing into something harder. Jasmine, get off my property, she shouted, her voice echoing across the snowy hills. You and your company and your lies and your $5 million offer, all of it, get out. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. You betrayed me in a way I didn't even know was possible, and I can't do this. Seo-jun looked at her with an expression of such pain it almost made her falter. Almost, but not quite. I love you, he said quietly, and even now, even through all the lies, something in her chest ached at hearing those words from him. I've loved you for 3 years as your pen pal, and I love you now, and I'll love you forever even if you never forgive me. That's real, Jasmine. That's the one thing I know is completely, absolutely real. Whatever else was confused or wrong or hurtful, that's real. He turned and walked away through the snow, and Jasmine stood on the hill watching him go, feeling like her heart was being torn apart, like every belief she'd had about knowing people and trusting instincts was crumbling. Because she'd trusted SeoulSearcher completely. And she'd been falling for Seo-jun despite trying not to. And they were the same person, and that should make it better, but somehow it made it so much worse. The next 3 days were torture in the specific way that heartbreak creates. Jasmine threw herself into farm work with almost manic intensity, helping Earl with the increased Christmas rush, the families coming for their last-minute trees. She smiled and was helpful and made children laugh and recommended tree species and didn't think about Seo-jun except for every single moment she wasn't actively focused on something else, which meant she thought about him constantly. Messages kept coming through Lang Connect. She didn't block him, but she didn't respond either, just let them accumulate like evidence of something she didn't want to examine. I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I miss you so much it physically hurts. I understand if you never forgive me, but please don't disappear completely. 3 years of friendship has to mean something. The offer expires in 3 days. Whatever you decide, I support it. If you want to sell for the financial security, that's valid. If you want to keep the farm and fight, I'll help however I can, even though you hate me. I'm not giving up on us. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm going to keep trying anyway. On December 19th, the day before Cascade Development's deadline, Mrs. Park came to the farm with papers and an air of expectation. Ms. Brooks, I need your decision. $5 million, all debts cleared, clean transaction closing on January 15th. Or we walk away and you keep struggling with a failing business. Those are your options. Jasmine looked at the papers, the contract that would change her life. Life-changing money, financial security, her student loans gone, her future stable. Never having to worry about making rent or paying bills. Never having to work a job she didn't love just for the paycheck. All she had to do was let go of her grandmother's dream. Let this place become condos and a hotel and a spa for rich people. I need 1 more day, Jasmine said, her voice steadier than she felt. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m., Mrs. Park said, her patience clearly wearing thin. After that, the offer is withdrawn permanently and we move on to other properties. I'll have your answer by then, Jasmine promised. After Mrs. Park left, after Jasmine had watched her Mercedes disappear down the driveway for what might be the last time, she walked through the farm one final time before her decision. She touched the trees her grandmother had planted 20 years ago, Seedlings then that were now mature and ready for harvest, stood in the barn where she'd played as a child, where her grandfather had taught her to identify different types of wood by smell. Sat on the farmhouse porch where she'd spent summer evenings learning constellations from her grandmother, finding patterns in chaos. She opened Lang Connect and scrolled through 3 years of messages with SeoulSearcher, with Seo-jun, the same person, the man who'd supported her through breakups and job stress and family drama, who'd celebrated her successes and mourned her losses, who'd told her about his own struggles with family expectations and finding authentic purpose, who'd become her best friend without either of them planning it. She read one message from 2 years ago, from when he'd been struggling with a major family conflict. Sometimes I think about giving up everything, just walking away from what my family wants and starting over completely. But I'm afraid of losing their approval, of being alone, of making the wrong choice. Is wanting approval cowardly? She'd responded, "It's human. We all want approval from people we love. But there's courage in choosing yourself too. Sometimes disappointing people who love you is necessary for becoming who you're meant to be. That doesn't make it easy, but it makes it right." He'd written back, "You always know exactly what I need to hear. You're my conscience, bookworm Jazz, the voice that reminds me to be brave when I want to be safe. Thank you for being that for me." Jasmine felt tears on her cheeks reading it, remembering that conversation, remembering dozens like it over 3 years. He'd been real with her. For 3 years, he'd been genuinely, completely real. The only thing he'd hidden was his name and his location and the fact that he might one day be sent to acquire her property. And yes, that mattered. That was a violation of trust. But the person he'd been, the friendship they'd built, that had been authentic. She picked up her phone with shaking hands and called him. He answered on the first ring, his voice rough like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. Probably both. "Jasmine?" "Meet me at the farm," she said, "at the gazebo, now." He arrived less than 20 minutes later, which meant he'd been close, probably at the inn in town where he'd been staying. They stood in the gazebo while snow fell around them, the sun setting behind the mountains, painting everything orange and pink. "I read all our old messages," Jasmine said, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. 3 years of conversations, thousands of messages. "And you were right about one thing. Everything you told me was real." "It was," Seo-jun said fervently. "All of it, I swear." "But you lied about who you were," Jasmine continued, needing to say all of it. "You violated the one fundamental rule of our friendship, which was honesty. You let me tell SeoulSearcher things I would never have told Seo-jun. Because I thought you were different people, you used information I shared in confidence to manipulate our in-person relationship." "I never used anything to manipulate you," Seo-jun said. "But we're right that I lied by omission, that I violated your trust. That breaks something fundamental and I don't know how to fix it." "I don't know if you can fix it," Jasmine admitted. "I trusted SeoulSearcher with my whole heart. I was falling for Seo-jun, and finding out you're the same person feels like both of those relationships were false, like I never really knew you at all." "They weren't false," Seo-jun said desperately. "They were just fragmented. I should have made them whole by telling you immediately. I hate that I didn't. But Jasmine, the person you knew online and the person you were getting to know here, they're both me. All of me. The only thing I hid was that they were the same person." "I know," Jasmine said, and her voice broke. "That's what I've been trying to figure out for 3 days. Whether I can forgive you for hiding it, whether what we had was real enough to survive you breaking my trust this badly." "Can you?" Seo-jun asked, and she heard fear in his voice, raw and obvious. Forgive me? I don't know, Jasmine admitted, but I need you to understand something. I'm not selling the farm. I'm keeping it. I'm going to fight for it and probably fail, but I'm going to try. And that decision has nothing to do with you or your company or forgiving you. I'm making it because it's what my grandmother would have wanted. Because some things matter more than money. I know, Seo-jun said. I told Mrs. Park 2 days ago that you wouldn't sell, that she should withdraw the offer. I submitted my resignation effective immediately. I'm done with Cascade Development. You quit, Jasmine said, genuinely surprised. Because of me? Because of what you taught me, Seo-jun corrected. Because I don't want to be part of a company that destroys places like this. Because you showed me that some things matter more than business or career advancement. Because I'd rather be unemployed and have a chance with you than keep a job that requires me to work against what I believe in. That's very dramatic, Jasmine observed. I learned from the best, Seo-jun said with a weak smile. You're the one who told SeoulSearcher 2 years ago that choosing yourself over obligation takes courage. I did say that, Jasmine acknowledged, and I meant it. But Seo-jun, I'm not ready to forgive you completely. You hurt me. You violated my trust in a way that's going to take time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. I understand, Seo-jun said, and she could see acceptance in his expression. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong. But I'm asking for the chance to try to earn back what I broke, however long it takes. Why? Jasmine asked. Why fight for this? You could go back to Korea, find someone else, start over clean without all this baggage. Because 3 years of friendship means something, Seo-jun said simply. Because I don't want someone else. Because I've been in love with you since before I knew what you looked like, and that doesn't just go away. Because you're worth fighting for. They stood in silence for a long moment, snow falling around them. The farm spread out below in the gathering darkness. I'm not sending you away, Jasmine finally said, but I'm not promising anything either. I'm saying maybe. Maybe we can work through this. Maybe I can forgive you eventually. Maybe what we had can become something real now that all the secrets are gone. But you have to understand, trust is earned. You broke it catastrophically. Now you have to rebuild it from nothing. That means complete honesty from this point forward, even when it's uncomfortable. That means being patient when I'm angry about the lie. That means proving through actions, not words, that what you feel is real. I can do that, Seo-jun promised. I will do that, whatever it takes, however long it takes. Then help me save this farm, Jasmine said, not as SeoulSearcher and not as Seo-jun, the development representative, as who you actually are. Can you do that? Yes, Seo-jun said. Absolutely yes. The deadline passed. Cascade Development withdrew their offer. Mrs. Park called Jasmine foolish and short-sighted, said she'd regret turning down $5 million when the farm failed, but Jasmine didn't care because she'd made the right choice. The choice her grandmother would have wanted, the choice her heart demanded even if her head said it was impractical. Over the following months, winter turning to spring, turning to summer, Jasmine and Seo-jun worked together to make the farm viable. The grants he'd found came through, providing $30,000 in capital for crucial repairs. Earl helped them diversify, adding you-pick apple orchards for summer revenue and pumpkins for fall, turning the farm into a year-round operation instead of just Christmas. Seo-jun used his business degree to streamline operations, develop a marketing strategy that attracted more customers, create a social media presence that showcased what made Brooks Family Tree Farm special. It was hard work, exhausting work that left them both collapsed on the farmhouse porch at the end of long days. But it was working. Slowly, gradually, The farm was becoming sustainable, and even more slowly, even more gradually, trust rebuilt between them. Seo-jun was patient when Jasmine had moments of anger about the lie, when she'd be reminded of something SeoulSearcher had said and realized she'd shared that with Seo-jun without knowing. He was honest about everything, sometimes brutally so, even when honesty was uncomfortable. When she asked if he regretted quitting his job, he said yes sometimes, said it was scary being unemployed and living off savings. When she asked if he resented her for making him prove himself, he said yes, occasionally said it was hard to love someone who held you at arm's length. But he also said it was worth it, that she was worth it, that rebuilding trust was hard but necessary. He showed up every single day, proving through action that he was committed to both the farm and to her. 6 months after the revelation, on a warm June evening when they'd spent the day pruning young trees, they were sitting on the farmhouse porch as fireflies started appearing in the dusk. "Can I tell you something?" Seo-jun asked, his voice careful, like he was afraid of her reaction. "Always," Jasmine said, and meant it. Honesty was the foundation they were building on now. "When I first got the assignment to acquire this property, before I even came to Vermont, I almost refused. I'd been talking to you online for 3 years, and you'd mentioned Vermont and your grandmother's farm so many times. I had this fear, this intuition that it might be yours. And when I confirmed through research that it was, when I saw Dorothy Brooks owned Brooks Family Tree Farm, and I knew that was your grandmother, I should have recused myself. Should have told my company there was a conflict of interest. But I didn't because I wanted to meet you. I wanted to see if the person I'd fallen for through messages was real." "Was I?" Jasmine asked quietly. "Real?" "More real than I could have imagined," Seo-jun said, and his voice was full of emotion. "Everything I loved about Bookworm Jazz was there in person. Your kindness, your determination, your refusal to compromise your values. But there was also more. Your smile, your laugh, the way you look at the mountains in the morning, the way you care for this place and the people who visit. I fell in love with you twice, Jasmine. Once through words and once through presence. And I'd do it again despite all the pain, all the complications, all the mistakes I made." "That's very romantic," Jasmine said, "for someone who betrayed my trust." "I know," Seo-jun said. "I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that if you let me, if you give me the chance." "The rest of your life?" Jasmine repeated. "That's a long time." "Not long enough," Seo-jun said. "Not nearly long enough for everything I want to do with you, everything I want to build with you." Jasmine looked at him in the fading light. This man who'd been her pen pal and her betrayer and her partner and something more complicated than any single word could capture. 6 months of watching him show up, of watching him be honest, even when it hurt, of watching him pour himself into saving a farm that wasn't his because it mattered to her. "I forgive you," she said, and felt the words shift something in her chest, releasing a weight she'd been carrying. "Not completely, not all the way. I'm still hurt, and I might always have some part of me that's angry about what you did. But mostly I forgive you for hiding who you were, for not telling me immediately when we met in person, for letting me fall for you while keeping that secret. I forgive you." "Thank you," Seo-jun said, and she could hear emotion cracking his voice. "I don't deserve it, but thank you." "You're right, you don't deserve it," Jasmine said with a small smile. "But I'm giving it anyway because love is about grace as much as justice. And because holding on to anger is exhausting and I'm tired of it." "Love?" Seo-jun repeated carefully, like the word was precious and fragile. "I love you," Jasmine said, committing to it fully. "I loved SeoulSearcher before I met you in person. I was falling for Seo-jun before I knew who you were. And now that I know you're the same person, all those feelings came together into something bigger than either version separately. So yes, love. Complicated, still healing, sometimes angry love, but love. Seo-jun kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise and relief. And Jasmine kissed him back and thought that this messy, complicated second chance at trust and love and partnership, this was worth more than any amount of money Cascade Development could have offered. 1 year after she'd inherited the farm, on Christmas Eve, with the farm busier than it had been in decades, Jasmine and Seo-jun stood on the hill overlooking the property. The education programs she'd developed were bringing school groups year-round. The U-pick orchard had been successful beyond expectations. The pumpkin patch had drawn families from 3 states in October. They'd hired 2 full-time employees, in addition to Earl, were planning to add a small farm store next spring. The farm wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. "We did it," Jasmine said, watching families below selecting their Christmas trees. "You did it," Seo-jun corrected. "I just helped." "No," Jasmine said firmly. "We did it together. You helped me save something that mattered. I helped you become someone who builds instead of just acquires. We did it together as partners." "Together," Seo-jun agreed. "I love being a we, even though I definitely didn't earn it." "You've earned it," Jasmine said. 12 months of showing up every day, of being completely honest even when it's uncomfortable, of choosing this life and this farm and me over everything else. You've earned back the trust you broke." "Only took a year," Seo-jun joked weakly. "Some things are worth waiting for," Jasmine said. "Some trust is worth rebuilding slowly and carefully." 2 years after inheriting the farm, they got married in the barn, decorated with evergreen boughs and white lights. Small ceremony with just close friends and the people who'd helped save the farm. Earl cried openly, said he'd never thought he'd see the farm not just survive, but thrive. Mrs. Chen from Vermont Community Bank, who'd restructured their loans, said it was the best ending she'd seen to a family farm story. Even Mrs. Park from Cascade Development sent a gift and a note saying she was glad Jasmine had proved her wrong. In her vows, Jasmine said, "When we met, you were lying to me, or at least lying by omission, which is still lying. You knew who I was from 3 years of messages, and you didn't tell me. You let me fall for you in person while hiding that you were someone I'd already fallen for years ago through words. And I'm not going to pretend that didn't hurt, that it wasn't a betrayal that nearly destroyed us before we even started. But here's what I learned. Through a year of watching you rebuild what you broke. Sometimes people make mistakes not because they want to hurt us, but because they're afraid of losing us. Sometimes the lies we tell are about protecting something precious rather than destroying it. You were wrong not to tell me immediately, but I understand why. Because when you find someone who sees you, really sees all of you, losing them feels impossible. So you hid hoping that by the time truth came out, I'd care enough to forgive. And I do. I forgive you for the lie. I forgive you for the fear. I forgive you for being human and imperfect and complicated. And I love you for all of it. For being SeoulSearcher who supported me through screens when I needed someone to understand me. For being Seo-jun who showed up in person and helped me save something worth saving. For being brave enough to quit a job that required you to work against your values. For choosing this farm and choosing me and choosing a life that's real over one that just looks successful. I choose you too, every day, forever. In his vows, Seo-jun said, 3 years of messages, and I never mentioned I was sent to ruin you. That's what you said when you found out who I was. And you were right to be angry, right to feel betrayed, right to question everything we'd built. I made a choice to hide my identity, and it was the wrong choice, even though I made it for what felt like right reasons. But here's what I want you to know. In 3 years of messages, I told you everything that mattered. I told you my dreams and fears and hopes. I told you about the pressure I felt from family and the person I wanted to be instead of the person I was expected to be. I told you that talking to you felt like coming home, like finding the part of myself I'd lost to obligation and expectation. All of that was true. The only thing I didn't tell you was my name and that I was physically coming to Vermont. And yes, those things matter. Identity matters, honesty matters. But the person behind the name, the soul you came to know through words, that was completely authentic. You knew me better through messages than most people who see me every day. When I met you in person, when I realized bookworm Jazz was Jasmine, was this incredible woman fighting to save her grandmother's legacy, I should have told you immediately. I know that. I'll regret not telling you every day for the rest of my life. But I don't regret anything that came after. I don't regret falling in love with you twice. I don't regret quitting a job that required me to be someone I didn't want to be. I don't regret choosing this life with you over everything else. You taught me that courage is choosing yourself even when it disappoints others. You taught me that some things matter more than money or status or family approval. You taught me what love looks like when it's real and hard and worth fighting for. I love you, Jasmine. I loved you as SeoulSearcher before I knew your face. I love you as Seo-jun, and now that I know your heart. And I'll love you as your husband for every day we have together. Thank you for forgiving what seemed unforgivable. Thank you for giving me a second chance I didn't deserve. Thank you for choosing us even when it would have been easier to walk away. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the trust you've given me. I promise to be honest, even when it's hard. I promise to choose you every single day the way you chose me. I promise to help you save every scraggly tree, preserve every tradition, build every dream. Because that's what love is. Not grand gestures or perfect words. It's showing up, doing the work, choosing each other, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated. They kissed as husband and wife, while their guests cheered. 5 years after inheriting the farm, Jasmine stood on the same hill where she'd confronted Seo-jun about his lies. But now she was holding their daughter, Minji, age 2, who was pointing at Christmas trees and squealing with delight. Seo-jun stood beside her, his arm around her waist, watching their daughter with an expression of complete contentment. The farm was thriving beyond what anyone had thought possible. They'd expanded the education programs, started hosting weddings in the summer, developed partnerships with local schools. The small farm store they'd built sold local products and had become a destination itself. Brooks Family Tree Farm was now featured in travel guides, had been profiled in agricultural journals as a model for sustainable small farming. Your grandmother would be proud, Seo-jun said, pulling Jasmine closer. She'd be amazed, Jasmine corrected, and probably smug that I kept the place despite everyone saying I should sell, despite a $5 million offer. Rightfully smug, Seo-jun said. You proved everyone wrong. We proved everyone wrong, Jasmine corrected. It's always we now. We saved the farm. We built the programs. We made this life. I love being a we, Seo-jun said. Even after 5 years? Especially after 5 years, Seo-jun confirmed. Do you ever regret it? Jasmine asked, watching Minji toddle through snow toward a tree. Walking away from development? Losing your family's approval when you quit all of it? Never, Seo-jun said without hesitation. That choice led me here. To you, to Minji, to this life. To work that matters and a purpose I can believe in. How could I regret that? Even though your family still won't speak to you? Jasmine pressed. He was quiet for a moment. That hurts. I won't pretend it doesn't. But I didn't give up everything. I gave up obligation and expectation and pretending to be someone I wasn't. What I gained is infinitely more valuable. What did you gain? You, Seo-jun said simply. A life that feels authentic. The freedom to make choices based on what I believe rather than what's expected. The possibility of actual happiness instead of just successful misery. A daughter who will grow up knowing her father chose truth over comfort. That's not giving up everything. That's gaining everything that matters. They stood together watching their daughter play, watching families pick trees, watching the farm that almost became luxury condos continuing to thrive. This was real. This was earned. This was worth every painful moment it had taken to create. Thank you, Seo-jun said quietly. For what? Jasmine asked, though she thought she knew. For not giving up on me, for forgiving what seemed unforgivable, for building this life with me even though I started everything with a lie, for teaching me that sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone earn back trust they broke. You're welcome, Jasmine said, and thank you for helping me save something worth saving. For quitting a job that required you to be someone you're not, for 3 years of messages that let me know you before I met you, even if you hid who you were. Best worst decision I ever made, Seo-jun said. Matching with you on that app, falling in love with bookworm jazz, then meeting you and making everything complicated. Second best worst decision, Jasmine corrected. The best worst decision was not telling me who you were immediately, because it forced us to build trust from nothing, and trust earned is stronger than trust assumed. Complicated math, Seo-jun observed. Complicated love, Jasmine said, but the best kind. They stood together on that hill as the sun set on Christmas Eve, their daughter playing in snow, the farm spread below them like a promise kept. 3 years of messages that became betrayal, that became forgiveness, that became love, that became this. A life neither of them had planned, but both had chosen. A second chance at trust that was harder and messier than first trust, but ultimately stronger. This was what it meant to save something worth saving. Not just the farm, but each other, but trust, but love that survived truth.